Welcome to the news roundup. I'm going to start with the big software crash we've just witnessed. It seemed a software or a firmware upgrade went a little bit wrong. The whole lot crashed. Doctors had no medical records, chemists no prescriptions, aircraft you couldn't check in. The list was actually endless and it was worldwide. Just shows how internet connected we really are. But I mean, look around. There are three groups of people who didn't really suffer at all. It just makes me think. The first one was China. Well, they simply refused to use this filthy Western software that we all depend on. They escaped this totally. Then comes Elon Musk, who simply said he deleted all the affected software instantly, then continued on regardless, using his own software. And the final category has to be the native populations of numerous countries around the world, like Peru, Papua New Guinea, Guyana, Democratic Republic of Congo, Siberia, Lapland. For the vast majority of them, they're probably asking, what's the internet? Makes you think. Well, Tesla Giga Shanghai is now back up to full speed and operating at full capacity as the demand for EV just grows rapidly. See, we might just look at local markets, Europe, UK, maybe even America. But as many pointed out, UK's got about 65 million people, Germany about 85 million. Indonesia has got 275 million. And India, 1.3 billion. Even the USA, with its 330 million, is absolutely dwarfed. Now, demand did slump in various countries at the beginning of the year, particularly Q1, but it's long since caught up, and it's now fairly rattling along with some key exceptions. Well, it's just been confirmed. VW believes Tesla is confirmed as the big leader, but they believe they can catch up with them in software. This is the one who've not yet done an over-the-air update on any of the cars in America. But you have to imagine Tesla's a bit like Alexa. For Alexa, you just have a little terminal sat on your coffee table, but it's linked to a much bigger real thing through the cloud, the internet. Well, Tesla run a similar massive computer with all their cars acting like your little coffee table units. But each one infinitely more powerful in their own right. They have really decent processors in them made by NVIDIA. Now, others are starting to look into different ideas, Internet of Everything, where everything is interlinked. And EVs are now being targeted for where we go in the future. This will be an interesting one to see, but what I can say is no EVs were affected in any way as far as I can find out. All operated correctly, which would indicate either they weren't subject to whatever it was that caused this crash in the first place, or all the manufacturers have put in sufficient measures to stop it being an issue. I sincerely hope it's the latter. I sincerely hope that these cars are totally safe for the future, but it does raise a worry. Now, in the meantime, Volvo are also suffering. This seems to be a software-driven one today. The XC90, the new EV, big flagship model, that's just been announced that they're going to launch it without key features. These are things like driver assist and certain display features, and they're saying that it's okay, take delivery of your car, we'll just add them later through an over-the-air update. Not sure that many of the manufacturers have actually cracked this over-the-air update lark. I know Volkswagen, you have to take your car into the dealer to do an over-the-air update. Does that not seem an oxymoron? Anyway, they suffered from this with the XC30. Well, it's a slightly different way. They actually issued them probably knowing it wasn't right and then had to do a massive recall in June. So software is the issue for this one, and this is the one area where the legacy auto have not yet fully adopted what an EV actually is. Anyway, time will tell. Software over-the-air updates, they should be standard. We get it on a mobile phone, for example. You get a mobile phone. The first thing you do, it says doing a software update, and it ticks over, or a firmware update they call it, if it's to do with the actual stuff inside. And the first job you do, you see it ticking up 5, 10, 15, 20, up to 80, 90. Firmware updated. Every device you buy a printer, you have to do a firmware update. You buy a tablet, firmware update. You buy television, you get regular firmware updates on those. So these over-the-air updates are happening all the time. Seems strange they can't get them working on cars, some of the manufacturers. Now, something we were told years and years and years ago, when electric cars first came out, is that lithium is one of the most common materials, elements in the whole of the universe. It's about third in line to hydrogen or something crazy. The problem we had when we started making batteries in any big numbers was the processing of it. Apparently it's a very labour intensive and energy intensive process to get what is a very common material and turn it into the usable form, which is often a carbonate. And so it wasn't where the lithium was that was the problem, it was where the refining of the lithium was. And the big ones for that were China, they're also very big in Australia, and a couple in South America. So lithium has never been a problem finding it, there's masses of it, it's just nobody was refining it. So, just been discovered, Serbia has got masses of lithium, and they've actually already got a lithium mine. Just up until now nobody knew about it, and everybody could buy it cheaper from China or Australia or South America. So nobody was interested in it. But now with the drive, and certainly with tariffs and with subsidies going to people who don't use Chinese, all these discoveries are coming out. Serbia's the latest. Well, good luck on them. They've got a lithium mine. What they need to do is they need to start refining it, and they're in talks with both Stellantis and Mercedes to do exactly that. It's just that it takes a little bit of money and a little bit of forward thinking, but I think most people now have accepted that, yeah, batteries are here to stay, lithium batteries are here to stay. But they're a bit late into the game. The big giants are already racing ahead, and they're already starting to look into things like sodium batteries and other elements which may one day make lithium redundant. From my own point of view, I've been aware of this for a long time. I lived most of my life down in Cornwall. Down there we had the tin mines. None of them were operating when I was living down there. They'd long since finished. The price of tin now, again, is cheaper in South America or China to go and mine it. However, you go down there and everywhere you go there are Cornish tin mines, redundant. Some of them now are tourist attractions. You can actually go down into a Cornish tin mine, and some of them, if you want to, go right out several miles under the sea. These are places like St Just, right down near Land's End, and the mine is on top of a cliff. It goes right the way down hundreds of feet and then turns at right angles, just heads out to sea for several miles. Now, one of the problems they had with the tin mines way back in the day, they've been mining tin here, by the way, for 3,000 or 4,000 years, so this is not new. There is Cornish tin has been found in Egyptian bronze metals. Bronze, by the way, is a combination of copper and tin. Copper on its own, very soft, bend it. If you add a little bit of tin, which is also a very, very soft metal, you get something that's very hard, like bronze. So 5,000 years ago, they were mining tin in Cornwall and actually transporting it to Egypt. But since it's gone out of fashion, this in the last 100 years, the tin mines are empty. And one of the problems with the tin mine is because they're underground, and particularly when they go out under the sea, water seeps in. So all of these tin mines, when they were operating, had massive pumps. And that's those big wheels you see on top. These are pump wheels, and one of them would be pumping water out, another set of those wheels would be operating the lift, be a steam operated lift, and those were the big pulley wheels. So pumping water out of tin mines has been an occupation for 3,000 or 4,000 years. But of course, when they stopped mining tin, they shut down all the pumps and everything. And what's happened is all these mines have flooded. Now, it doesn't make any difference to anyone because the water will only come up in the tin mine up to the water table. Can't rise out the ground. It's not like that. But what's really interesting, lithium turns out to be one of the most soluble elements in the whole of the periodic table. And lithium is found abundantly in granite. And Cornwall is made of granite, as is an awful lot of the UK, as people can see from the map. So over the centuries and over the decades, more recent decades, the water has been standing inside the mines and it's been leaching out the lithium. And this water now is, they call it brine. It's not always salt water. It can be natural water, spring water. But it's absolutely laced with lithium. And the one advantage of it is you don't have to drill, you don't have to mine. That's all been done thousands of years ago. All you have to do is pump the water out and process it. And there's a company down there called Cornish Lithium. I've been involved with them for many years, and that is exactly what they're doing. There are other places throughout the country where the lithium concentration is higher than the granite in Cornwall, and they're being looked at the moment. And this is no mess. There's no drilling, there's no energy required. It is literally just pump the water out and then whatever the process is to get it. So we're suddenly finding there's loads of this stuff all over the world. So those of you who are forecasting that we're going to run out of lithium or anything like that, absolute rubbish. Third most common element on the planet. There's loads of it. It's a bit like saying we're going to run out of salt. Never going to happen. Anyway, wish all the best to Cornish Lithium. I hope they succeed. It'd be nice to be able to make our own lithium and our own batteries in the UK if the government gets together and is anywhere near as green or as environmentally aware as they tell us they are. Now, a lot of people state and believe that the reason all the manufacturers are going over to China, they're going over there solely for the cheap labour. They pay people in China less than they pay people in the UK, Europe or the US. But that's not the whole story. See, one of the things the Chinese are very good at doing is getting government grants, admittedly, and then using that to develop a production line that is much more efficient. Being more efficient, it will use less labour. And therefore the labour cost will be lower, even though they may well have chosen to pay the workers an awful lot more than the minimum. They don't, but even if they did. And what's happening at the moment is when the big suppliers, these are people like Bosch, who make motors and all sorts for the motor industry. And Bosch are saying that their drivetrains are very, very complicated. And they say that typical similar situation in China, they are 30% more efficient at making those drivetrains. That's not down to labour. That's down to design. And this is where Tesla came out in the early days when they couldn't find stuff off the shelf to buy for their first EVs. They had to go make their own. And they made exactly what they wanted. Whereas other companies like Ford or Mercedes, they had to buy what was available because they did not have the ability to make the quantity they needed for the factories. So Legacy Auto has always made do and mend with whatever's available, as long as it's cheap. Whereas others like BYD, XPeng and Tesla have always said, well, if we can't find the right one, we'll just make our own. And that's why they've got something called vertical integration. It means instead of everyone supplying bits into it and you just end up as assembly, which is what Ford effectively is, then they actually make everything themselves, which keeps the cost down. They don't have to pay profit to the dealers. They don't have transport costs. They don't have stocking costs the same, where you have to order a certain number in advance. And they're finding that it's very, very, very much more efficient to do that. And at last Bosch is coming round and saying, yeah, we actually need to do something like that. We need to get away from this. Here's a brake pad on a shelf. Anyone can buy it, but you have to adapt your car to fit our brake pad, brake caliper. Whereas what the Chinese do is they say, well, if we need this part, let's make it for our particular car. And that's much more efficient. So they're coming round to it, and by doing that, they should be able to drop the price of the drivetrain by about 30%. And if that applies to batteries and other items, then you're going to find the price coming down anyhow. And one of the biggest items, and this is all hitting the headlines at the moment, is gigacasting. And this was an invention of Tesla, who decided that if you're making a car, there's no point having 78 individual components which all need welding, gluing, screwing, riveting or bolting together to make up a chassis. And that's what has been done in the motor industry for over 100 years. And Elon said, we need to find someone who could do it. He went to a number of companies, said, can you cast a one-piece chassis? They all said no. One of them hesitated, said, well, no. And then he said, okay, we'll use you. Anyway, they worked together, and the rest is now history. Most electric cars now have one-piece gigacasting. They're cast in aluminium, which makes them very light compared to steel. They're stronger than steel, believe it or not. They're very much cheaper, very much quicker. So there's been a change. The motor industry, they must have known about this for the last 100 years, that that was a possibility, but they persisted in welding 78 bits together. Huge intensive processes, massive big robots doing all this. You've seen the robots coming over and doing the spot weld. In EVs, there's none of that. You chuck in some aluminium, goes into a mould, presses in, comes out, you've got your front or rear chassis. Nobody's yet made a full chassis in casting, but they're now in two pieces. And at last the industry is saying, well, maybe we should have a look at this. Toyota was one. They actually bought a Model Y, took it apart, and their own words, they said they were stunned with what had advanced. So legacy, they've just been stuck in the past for so long, not wanting to change, not wanting to innovate anything. And now they're being forced to, not just for the EVs either, because this will transfer back into any ICE cars or hybrid cars they're still making over the next 5 or 6 years, maybe 10 years, depends on government targets. But over in France, they're just beginning to find out that price isn't everything. Dacia Spring sales in Europe have just crashed, France in particular. Now, this is one of the cheapest cars on the market, but again, whereas Dacias used to be made within Europe, for the EV, they've decided to go to China. Why, I'll never know. Obviously, it kept the cost down, but now, with all the tariffs going on, it's suddenly not looking such a good decision. So the Dacia Spring was introduced into France as a really cheap car, really budget end of the market, very, very affordable, ludicrous price in some ways. Even in the UK, it's £14,000. And they had a massive boom in sales. But unfortunately, that's come to an end. First of all, because it's now made in China, or it's always been made in China, they are now putting tariffs on it. And those tariffs can be 20, 30, 40%. Well, on a £14,000 car, for 40% is what? £5,000. It's a massive, massive jump. In addition to that, France still offers subsidies or assistance towards buying these, and those are not available for cars that are made in China. So in a double whammy, the price has gone up because of the tariffs, and the subsidies have disappeared. So these cars now would be appearing somewhere on a par with other cars made in France, some of the Citroën EC3 or the Renault 5, which don't have as many or any Chinese components. And I don't think there's that many people who would choose a Dacia Spring at the same price as a Citroën EC3 or a Renault 5. So the market has gone and Dacia Spring sales have slumped. It just shows how effective subsidies are, but it also shows how you can be misled into looking at the Dacia Spring sales figures and saying EVs are finished. No, they're not. They got very healthy order books for the Citroën E3C. They got amazingly healthy order books for the Renault 5. And so many other cars are coming through now, which are really, really popular and selling incredibly well. Some of them not yet available for delivery, but they're taking pre-orders. So Dacia Spring sales slumping, that's a factor, nothing to do with the car or the price or an EV. That is just down to the fact that you lose you get your tariffs and you lose your subsidies. But of course, in this country, we're looking at the best-selling car at a budget level is obviously the MG4. Absolutely cracking car. It's down in the £28,000 price range as a starting point, which for an EV is actually low. Nowhere near low enough, but that's heading this way. But of course, we're not in Europe. Well, we're physically in Europe, but we're not in the EU anymore. And so there is no legal requirement for us to put tariffs onto Chinese products. So we're hoping that the MG4 will not be hit with massive tariffs, even though some of the cars like the Tesla Model 3. Tesla Model 3s at the moment are still made in China for the UK market. Tesla Model Y, by the way, made in Giga Berlin. So that's a European car, but that still uses some Chinese batteries. So it's a very up and down situation at the moment. But right now we have no tariffs on Chinese imports. And I suspect the MG4 will continue to be one of the most popular models that we have. Well, that's it for the weekly roundup. It's been an awful lot software driven today. It's going to be assuming greater importance in the future. So thanks very much for watching. If you have liked it, click the like button. If you'd like to see more, click the subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can tell you when we launch videos. And a big thank you to our Patreon members. Call out to our latest Patreon member, Brendan. Thanks for joining us, Brendan. Your support is much appreciated. Thanks very much. I'm Dave.